Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? She could feel their eyes on her without a single glance. Every movement she made, every breath, every subtle shift of her shoulders landed like an intrusion in a space that wasn't built for her. The air in Fob Nightingale hung thick with diesel and distrust. Mud clung to every bootstep, and the jungle pressed against the wire fence like it wanted to swallow the place whole. Lieutenant Commander Maya Callahan stood at the narrow window of her temporary quarters, the rain tracing blurred streaks across the glass. She watched the Rangers move below, all squared shoulders and silent camaraderie. Men who had fought together for years. Men who didn't look twice at one another, but looked far too long at her. She felt this kind of silence before, the kind that hums with judgment, but this one was heavier. Here, inside General Marcus Thorne's kingdom, it was ritual. Every laugh that cut off when she walked into the mess hall, every conversation that dropped an octave as she passed, they weren't accidents. They were a message. She wasn't welcome. Not as a SEAL. And certainly not as the first woman assigned to this joint task force. The gold trident on her chest felt like a spotlight. It should have been her shield, proof that she'd earned her place through years of blood, grit, and silence. Instead, it made her a target. Her bunk was a metal box, spotless, isolated, a courtesy designed to separate, not respect. She spent the first 2 hours after arrival field stripping her Sig Sauer P226 and her custom rifle, cleaning each part until it gleamed beneath the dim light. The mechanical rhythm steadied her. Gun oil, steel, precision, order. They didn't whisper behind her back. At 1850, a runner appeared, a corporal, nervous, sunburned, words tripping out of his mouth. "General Thorne wants to see you, ma'am. Command 10th, 1900 hours." She nodded once, "Thank you." 10 minutes. Enough time to check her weapon, smooth the creases of her uniform, and set her expression into the calm mask that had carried her through every test the world had thrown at her. Outside, the air was so wet it clung to her skin. Mud churned beneath her boots as she crossed the compound on the slick wooden planks that served as roads. Men passed her, none met her eyes. The storm hadn't started yet, but the clouds were bruised and heavy, waiting to break. Inside the command tent, it already had. Sweat, coffee, electronics, the smell of command. A dozen senior officers stood around a holographic map glowing in shades of blue and green, and at the center, General Marcus Thorne. He looked carved from the same granite as the mountains outside. The set of his jaw suggested a lifetime of giving orders that were never questioned. His pale eyes cut across the room like spotlights. The second he saw her, the conversation stopped. "Lieutenant Commander Callahan," he said, low and flat, every syllable a weight. "Welcome to Nightingale." It wasn't a welcome. It was a warning. She stepped forward and came to parade rest. "General." He gestured to the glowing map. "We're hunting a regional arms dealer. Codename, the Serpent. He's funded 3 insurgencies and cost us more men than I care to count. We've tracked him to a compound deep in the Cordillera Negra. Locals call it El Nido del Diablo, the Devil's Nest." He didn't look at her as he spoke. He didn't need to. The tone told her what she already knew. This was his show, his men, his war. "The 75th will form the primary assault element," Thorne continued. "Delta handles overwatch and extraction, standard operating procedure." Then he turned those glacier eyes back on her. "The Navy has seen fit to grace us with your presence. They tell me you're qualified for this sort of work." A ripple of amusement ran through the tent. Captain Miller, all sharp chin and arrogance, folded his arms, smirking. Reyes, the old master sergeant with eyes like worn leather, didn't move. "I am General," Callahan said evenly. Thorne took a slow step toward her. Heavy boots on plywood. The kind of deliberate advance predators make before they strike. He stopped just close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the bitter coffee on his breath. "Here at this command," he said quietly, so quietly the rest of the tent had to strain to hear, "We don't care about politics or press releases from the Pentagon. We care about mission success, and that success is built on trust, the kind earned in blood and dirt." He paused, his gaze dropping to the trident pinned above her heart. "That trust isn't given, it's earned, and it sure as hell isn't bought with a diversity initiative." The silence was absolute. Even the generators seemed to hold their breath. "I've read your file," Thorne went on. "Top of your class at Annapolis. Stellar Bud S record. On paper, you're a ghost." He leaned closer, voice a venomous whisper. "But paper burns, and I've never seen a SEAL who wasn't full of enough arrogance to sink a carrier." He straightened. The tent felt smaller. "Here, you are not special. You are a variable, and I don't tolerate unknown variables on my battlefield." Then his finger rose, deliberate, cruel. "Take it off." The words hit like a detonation. A collective breath sucked in. Miller's smirk sharpened. Ray's jaw tightened. Thorne's gaze stayed locked on her. "The trident, take it off." There it was. Not an order about tactics or performance or protocol, but humiliation. Public total. Her heart hammered once, hard enough that she felt it in her throat. Then the world went cold. No protest, no anger. Just motion. Her fingers found the clasps behind the pin, unfastening them with the precision of a surgeon. The small sound of metal sliding free seemed deafening. She drew it from her chest. It felt heavier than it ever had. The symbol of everything she'd survived, now just gold in her palm. She held it out to him, her arm steady. For a heartbeat, he looked almost disappointed. He'd expected fury, a crack in her composure, something human he could use. But she gave him nothing. He took it from her hand with a grunt. "You'll be attached to Captain Miller's assault element," he said. "You'll carry a rifle and follow orders. If you survive the operation and prove you're not a liability, maybe you'll get this back. If not, the jungle can have you." He pocketed the trident and turned away. "Dismissed." Callahan snapped a perfect salute to his back. Held it for one long breath. Then she pivoted, heels biting into the plywood floor, and walked out into the night. The rain had started, cold, hard, unrelenting. It ran down her face into her collar, the place on her chest where the trident had been felt raw, as if the metal had taken part of her skin with it. She didn't flinch, she didn't look back. Somewhere behind her, laughter returned to the tent, sharp, nervous, hollow. But out here, alone in the storm, Maya Callahan breathed in the smell of diesel and earth and rot, and let the humiliation sink into her bones. Not as weakness, as fuel. And when the thunder rolled across the jungle, she lifted her chin and whispered to no one. "Paper burns, but I don't." The rain answered for her, relentless and cold, washing the mud from her boots as she disappeared into the darkness. The mission briefing was a hammer blow of arrogance, and she saw it unravel before it began. The room was crowded with men who had already decided who mattered and who didn't. Maya stood at the back, her posture straight, expression calm, eyes fixed on the holographic terrain that hovered above the table. Thorne's plan was textbook Army doctrine: overwhelming force, direct assault, heavy air support. A blunt instrument aimed at a problem that demanded a scalpel. But Thorne didn't believe in scalpels. He believed in hammers. Captain Miller stood beside him, packing through the details like a man auditioning for his next promotion. "We'll insert here," he said, tapping the ridge with his laser pointer. "Two Black Hawks, Chalk 1 and Chalk 2, drop on the north slope. Delta Team lands on the objective building. We move fast, overwhelm the compound, extract the HVT, and exfil south." His voice had that confident, clipped rhythm of someone who'd never been caught wrong. But Maya's eyes caught something the others missed. The holographic display showed a ravine, narrow, deep, and perfectly positioned to trap them if the weather shifted. And the weather was shifting. She could feel it in the air outside, smell it in the soil. When Miller finished, Thorne looked around the room like a preacher expecting amens. No one spoke. Until she did. "Sir." Her voice was calm, level, but it cut through the hum like a blade through silk. Every head turned. "The Eastern Ravine," she said, gesturing toward the map. "Forecast says 3 inches of rain before dawn. That area becomes a flash flood zone. If we're forced to retreat that way, we'll be trapped." Miller smirked. "We'll be in and out in 20 minutes. The rain gives us cover, not a problem." She held his gaze. "It's a liability, Captain, not cover. If it floods, that route becomes impassable. We should consider a secondary LZ3 clicks north, higher ground, better exfil path." Miller laughed quietly under his breath. "We're not rewriting the op plan for a little rain, Commander." Thorne didn't even look up. "Your concern is noted and dismissed." It wasn't the first time she'd been ignored, but somehow this time the silence hit deeper. Because she could see it, the future, unspooling like a bad dream. The ravine swelling into a river. The ambush they wouldn't expect. The body bags that would come home, draped in flags. She said nothing more, just nodded once. "Crystal, General." The rest of the night blurred into the mechanics of preparation. Weapons checks, comm synchronization, armor inspection, the quiet before the storm, literal and otherwise. By 300, the rain had turned violent. Sheets of water hammered the base. The helicopters were grounded for a half-hour before Thorne forced a go. "Move out," he'd said, as if commanding the clouds themselves. Maya sat in the troop bay of Chalk 2, opposite Master Sergeant Reyes. The interior lights glowed red, bathing everyone in the color of nerves. The Rangers were silent, mechanical. Each man lost in the ritual of waiting, checking magazines, tapping armor plates, staring at nothing. She could feel the vibration through the deck plates, the thump of rotor blades, the thrum of adrenaline. She adjusted her headset, looked out the open door. Below, the jungle was an ocean of black, broken only by flashes of lightning. 30 seconds, someone shouted. She felt the shift in the air as the bird banked. The crew chief gave the hand signal. Green light. The rope dropped. One by one, Rangers vanished into the storm, swallowed by darkness and rain. Reyes went next, sliding fast, boots splashing into the unseen below. Maya followed, gripping the rope, her body moving on instinct, years of repetition encoded into muscle memory. The ground hit hard, mud sucking at her boots up to the ankles. She crouched low, scanning. Visibility was a nightmare. The rain was relentless, the jungle alive with motion. Miller's voice crackled over the radio. "Move, 2-minute interval, keep it tight." They advanced downhill through the trees, the glow of the compound faint through the canopy. The smell of diesel and wet earth filled her lungs. Her rifle hugged her shoulder. Each step was slow, deliberate. Then the world erupted. A scream of green tracers ripped through the trees. The crack of RPGs tore the night apart. The lead fire team vanished in a spray of dirt and shrapnel. "Contact front," someone bellowed. "Left, right." Chaos. Gunfire lit the jungle like lightning. Shadows darted. Men shouted, scrambled, returned fire. Maya hit the ground, rolling behind a tree, returning controlled bursts. Her sightline found nothing but muzzle flashes. It was a perfect ambush, 3-sided, coordinated. They knew exactly where the Rangers would be. Static hissed over the radio. Then Miller's panicked voice. "Talon 1, this is Ranger Lead. We are in a tick. Repeat, troops in contact." No response. Static. Reyes' machine gun barked nearby, short bursts of controlled fire. "We're bracketed," he shouted. "Mortars incoming." A flash. Then the ground heaved. A shell detonated behind them, the blast wave knocking her sideways. Her ears rang. Her helmet hit the mud. When her vision cleared, she saw it, the ridge to the east collapsing in sheets of brown water. The ravine. The flood. Exactly as she'd said. "Reroute," she yelled. "Pull back north." But Miller was screaming into the radio again, his voice high, frantic. "Push forward, push forward." It was suicide. She scanned the chaos, heart hammering. Reyes was firing, dragging a wounded ranger with one hand. Thorne, unbelievably, was there too, crouched near the command element, shouting into a field radio like the laws of physics couldn't touch him. Then an RPG hit a tree near him. The blast sent a splintered trunk crashing down. Thorne went under it, legs twisted. His scream cut through everything. Miller froze. His rifle dangled uselessly in his hands. The men were dying, and no one was in control. Callahan moved. Not out of thought, out of training, out of the cold, automatic clarity that years of pain had burned into her. She crawled through the mud, grabbed Miller by the vest, yanked him around. "Captain, get your men behind that ridge now." He just stared at her, blank, shell-shocked. So she keyed her own radio, switching to the platoon frequency. "All elements, this is Callahan. Pull back to grid 0479er 112, bounding Overwatch. Raise base of fire." A pause, hesitation. Then Reyes' voice, low and steady. "Roger that, first squad on me." It worked like a switch flipping. Training took over. Men began moving, firing, bounding in pairs. The chaos thinned into discipline. She felt the rhythm return, controlled bursts, staggered movements, communication in short, efficient bursts. The Rangers were still bleeding, still terrified, but they were fighting again. She reached Thorne, pale, grimacing, his leg twisted, bone through skin. Blood soaked the mud beneath him. "General," she said, voice calm, almost gentle, "I need to look at your leg." He didn't argue, couldn't. She cut the pant leg open, the wound ugly and pulsing, applied a tourniquet, tightened until the bleeding slowed, pulled a SAM splint from her pack. Her movements were quick, clinical, efficient. He tried to speak, to order, but the pain stole his words. "It's going to hurt," she said, injecting a measured dose of ketamine into his thigh. "Try to stay with me." He grunted, the drug pulling him away from the agony. Around her, Reyes' voice barked orders. Men fell back in good order. The fire slackened. The immediate threat faded to a distant roar. Callahan exhaled, checked Thorne's pulse, and looked up through the sheets of rain. The jungle groaned around them, alive, hostile, waiting for the next move. They had survived the first wave, but they were trapped. Cut off. Low on ammo. And the river had swallowed their only way out. Maya Callahan wiped the rain and blood from her face, her expression unreadable. Her mind was already calculating terrain, elevation, patterns, probabilities. This wasn't over, not yet. And somewhere in the chaos, a quiet thought surfaced, unbidden but certain. "This is where they'll finally see what kind of variable I really am." The rain answered, steady and relentless, as the jungle closed in around them. They were stranded in the devil's nest, surrounded and bleeding, and somehow she was the only calm one left. The jungle had gone eerily quiet after the ambush, the way a battlefield sometimes does when death is taking inventory. Rain hissed through the trees. Steam rose from the scorched mud. Somewhere out there, the enemy was repositioning, waiting. Maya crouched beside Thorne, double-checking the tourniquet. His face was gray, eyes glassy but lucid. The rain washed streaks of mud across his uniform. He was no longer a general here, just a wounded man clinging to consciousness. Reyes' voice crackled over comms. "All accounted for, Commander. 2 KIA, 3 wounded, ammo low, no comms with higher." She glanced at her own radio, the indicator blinked red. Dead channel. No extraction, no reinforcements. The storm had swallowed their link to the world. "Copy," she said. "We'll hold here until I say otherwise. Conserve ammo, no panic fire." Her voice was steady, measured, the kind of voice that makes other people breathe again. The Rangers huddled among the rocks and roots, reloading magazines, stripping ponchos for makeshift stretchers. Even Miller, shaken and pale, followed her orders without question now. The silence between the bursts of thunder was heavy. She could hear the jungle breathing, insects, dripping leaves, the whisper of movement too deliberate to be wind. They were being hunted. Rays crawled up beside her. "We're boxed in, ma'am. Ridge behind us, flood to the east, enemy front and flanks. They're tightening the noose." Maya looked down at the map laminated against her forearm. The blue lines of elevation, the green splotches of foliage. None of it matched the reality around them anymore. The jungle had rewritten itself in the storm. "Not boxed in," she murmured, "just outnumbered." He gave a humorless snort. "That's one way to say it." She looked over at Thorne. He was half-conscious, lips pale, breath shallow. The man who'd stripped her of her trident now depended on her heartbeat to stay alive. The irony didn't move her. Not yet. He stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Report," he croaked. She didn't sugarcoat it. "We're pinned, sir. Flood cut off exfil. You're wounded. Radios down. Command out of reach." He blinked hard, as if trying to reassert authority through will alone. Then fix it." "I'm working on it," she said quietly. He gritted his teeth, anger flashing through the pain. "We hold. Reinforcements will come." "They don't know where we are, General," she replied, eyes meeting his. "And if they did, they couldn't reach us through this storm." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain. Then softer, she added, "We'll make our own way out." He didn't answer. Maya turned back to the Rangers. "We need a defensible perimeter, high ground, and eyes on that ravine." Rays nodded, barking orders. The men moved fast, stacking gear, repositioning, setting fields of fire. Despite the exhaustion and fear, their discipline was automatic. The muscle memory of soldiers who'd learned to obey the voice that sounds calmest in hell. She could feel the weight of their glances. The way their skepticism had shifted into something else, not trust yet, but the recognition that she wasn't breaking. "Captain Miller," she called. He looked up from his muddy rifle, startled. "I need a count of ammunition and casualties. 2 minutes." He hesitated, then nodded. "Roger that." Giving him a simple task gave him something to hold on to, something other than guilt. She understood that kind of paralysis. She'd seen it before in rookies, in herself, years ago, before she learned that emotion could be sharpened into something useful. When Miller returned, his report was grim. "We're red on rifles, black on saw, 2 critically wounded, 1 stable, 1 not gonna make it." Maya closed her eyes for half a second, then opened them. "Strip ammo from the KIA, redistribute evenly, every round counts." He nodded again, this time without argument. The rain intensified, hammering against the leaves. The sound was endless, masking movement, swallowing sound, erasing their presence from the world. It was their enemy, but also their cover. Maya crouched, tracing lines in the mud with her gloved finger, thinking, calculating. Rays crawled up beside her again. "You got something?" "Maybe," she said. 2 clicks northwest, there's a saddle between peaks. If we can make it there, we might reach the far side of the range. Higher ground, less chance of ambush. But the climb," she glanced toward the slick wall of rock disappearing into mist. "It's going to hurt." Rays exhaled long and low. 3 wounded, the general, mud like quicksand. "That's not a climb, Commander, that's suicide." She met his eyes. "So is staying here." A beat of silence, then quietly, "You think they'll follow?" "They'll follow whoever sounds like they mean it," she said. He smiled faintly. "Then they'll follow you." She didn't answer, but she knew he was right. When she spoke again, her voice carried through the clearing. "Listen up." Every man turned, faces pale and drawn in the rain. "The enemy expects us to hold this ground or die here. We're not doing either. We're moving." A ripple of disbelief passed through them. 2 clicks northwest, there's a saddle through the range. It's high, steep, and it's hell. But it leads us out of this valley. That's our road home. We move in 10. Captain Miller looked up. With the wounded, we won't make it 50 meters. She fixed him with a steady gaze. We'll make it 50, then another 50. That's how this works. He wanted to argue, but the certainty in her voice stopped him cold. Reyes was already moving. You heard her. 10 minutes, get stretchers built. The platoon came alive. Ponchos became litters. Branches became poles. They stripped non-essential gear, redistributed weight, tightened straps. Every movement had purpose now. Maya worked beside them, wrapping wounds, securing splints, tying knots that would hold through the climb. Her hands never shook. Her tone never wavered. And slowly, the fear that had frozen them began to thaw, replaced by a quiet, grim focus. When she straightened, her hair plastered to her forehead, she caught Reyes watching her. Something thoughtful in his expression, not just respect, but recognition. He crawled closer, voice low. Ma'am, that knot you just tied. Modified clove hitch with a release loop. She looked up at him. You've seen it before. Once, he said. Pesh Valley, Afghanistan, long-range recon. Team got wiped out except one operator. Held off a company for 36 hours. Called in fire on their own position. They said the survivor used that knot. Her hands paused for the briefest moment. Reyes stared. That was you, wasn't it? She didn't answer, didn't have to. Something in her eyes, gray, unreadable, cold as a rifle barrel, told him everything. Reyes swallowed hard, his voice turned reverent. Nix. She looked back down at the litter, tightening the last strap. That name doesn't exist anymore. But it did. And as the rain poured harder, Reyes carried the truth in silence. When he turned to the men, his tone had changed. Quiet, urgent. Listen to me, he said to the nearest ranger. Whatever she says, you do it. No hesitation. Why? The man asked, confused. Because that woman, Reyes said, eyes burning, is the ghost that kept a whole valley alive. Word spread like fire through the exhausted platoon. They didn't know what it meant, but they felt the weight in Reyes's voice, the reverence in his tone. By the time Maya gave the order to move, something had shifted in the air. They weren't following a stranger anymore. They were following a legend. She took point, rifle slung, boots sinking into the mud, eyes on the faint outline of the mountain rising through the mist. The first step up the slope was agony, the second was worse. But the third was faith. And as the storm swallowed them whole, Maya Callahan led them upward, one silent step at a time, into the teeth of the mountain that wanted them dead. The Devil's Nest had found its match. The climb was hell, not the cinematic kind, but the slow, grinding kind that tears the soul before the body. Mud, roots, blood, and rain, that's all there was now. The jungle didn't just resist them, it fought back. Every handhold collapsed, every step slipped, every breath came with the weight of soaked gear and exhaustion that bit through bone. The slope was near vertical in places. It wasn't terrain, it was punishment. Maya Callahan took the lead. She didn't have to. She could have let the younger, stronger rangers go first. But leadership wasn't about comfort. It was about example. She carved steps into the slick mud with her entrenching tool, cutting footholds 1 miserable inch at a time. Anchor line, she called out softly. Her voice didn't carry over the storm, it cut through it. Reyes and 2 others hammered stakes and tied off ropes made from webbing and belts. They pulled, lifted, shoved, a human chain of bruised determination. Behind her, the litters carrying the wounded lurched upward by inches. Men grunted through gritted teeth, every movement fueled by something beyond strength. Fear, duty, maybe something smaller, the desperate wish to not die nameless on a foreign mountain. Every few meters Maya stopped, checked lashings, adjusted knots, directed weight distribution. Her commands were short, specific, surgical. She didn't yell, she didn't need to. Shift your weight left. Watch that route. 3-minute rest, hydrate. The Rangers obeyed, without hesitation, without question. Reyes watched her work between the flashes of lightning, the way her hands moved like she'd been born for this chaos. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion. Even her silence had authority. He fought under good officers before, brave ones, clever ones, but this was something else. This woman wasn't fighting against fear. She was using it, channeling it, turning it into fuel for everyone around her. Hours bled together. Rain became a rhythm. Mud became a heartbeat. At one point, a ranger slipped, the litter he was carrying almost sliding off the incline. "Got him," someone yelled. Reyes lunged, catching the rope. Maya was already there, anchoring her boot against the slope, hauling the man back with both hands. Her gloves tore. Mud streaked her face, but her expression didn't change. "Secure him," she ordered, "then move." No panic, no pause, just motion. The wounded moaned faintly. Thorne drifted in and out of consciousness on his stretcher, pale and trembling. He saw glimpses, her silhouette framed against lightning flashes, climbing, lifting, never faltering. It blurred into dream and memory. The officer he'd mocked, the trident he'd pocketed, the moment his world had come apart. And now she was the one dragging him out of the fire he'd built. When he closed his eyes, he saw her face again in that tent, calm, gray-eyed, immovable, and something inside him cracked. The storm raged harder. They climbed anyway. By dawn, the mountain was painted in gray mist and exhaustion. The men looked half-dead, eyes hollow, hands trembling, clothes torn and caked with mud. But they were still moving. They reached a narrow plateau, a shelf of rock barely wide enough for a dozen men. Maya called a halt. "Set litters down. Weapons check. Hydrate." The men collapsed. Some dropped their rifles beside them, too tired to care if the mud clogged the barrels. Reyes dropped next to her, gasping for breath. "We've been moving for 10 hours, ma'am. They're on fumes." "So am I," she said quietly. Then she scanned the ridge above, the last wall before the saddle. "But it's another 500 meters to cover before we're through the pass. We stop too long, we freeze." Reyes didn't argue. He just nodded, eyes full of quiet respect. For a moment there was silence, the kind that only comes after survival, a hollow, fragile quiet. The jungle below was still smoking from the firefight. Thunder muttered somewhere far off, but the rain had thinned to a steady drizzle. One of the younger rangers, Diaz, crawled closer, his voice shaking. "Ma'am, were you really in the Pesh Valley, the one they talk about?" Maya didn't look up from cleaning her rifle. Stories grow, memories don't. "But it was you, wasn't it, Nix?" She checked the bolt, snapped it back into place, and said softly, "Names don't win fights, son. People do." Diaz nodded slowly, then whispered almost to himself, "Yes, ma'am." That was how legend stayed alive, not in words but in silence. When they began climbing again, it wasn't discipline pushing them forward anymore. It was reverence, the kind that comes from seeing the impossible done right in front of you. Reyes carried the rear now, scanning for movement. The enemy hadn't given chase yet, the storm and terrain had done its job. But that wouldn't last. Halfway up the final slope, Maya's leg slipped. Her knee smashed into rock. She hissed but didn't stop. A flash of pain crossed her face, quick, raw, human, before she buried it under iron focus. Reyes saw it. He didn't say a word. By the time they reached the saddle, the sky had lightened to a dull silver. The rain hung like mist, soft and constant. On the far side of the mountain, the jungle stretched endlessly, vast, green, and unforgiving. "Hold here," she said. "Reposition, conceal litters." The men obeyed instantly. There was no hesitation now, only the ritual of trust. She posted sentries, then knelt beside Thorne again. His face was pale, eyes fluttering open. Pain and shame fought across his features. He tried to speak. She gave him water first, tipping the canteen carefully. "Why," he croaked, voice raw, "why are you still helping me?" She met his eyes. "Because they need a reason to believe they can still make it out of here, and watching me leave you behind, isn't it?" He stared at her for a long time, longer than she expected, then looked away. The silence between them wasn't forgiveness. It was recognition, the beginning of something slower, heavier, more painful than either. Maya turned away, scanning the horizon. The mist hid the valley below. Somewhere beyond that endless canopy, there was still a way home. She pulled out her waterproof map, flattening it against a rock, tracing routes with her finger. Reyes crawled up beside her. "We can't stay here long," he said. "We're out of water. Ammo's down to half a mag per man." "I know," she murmured. Her eyes didn't leave the map. "But we buy time, we regroup, then we find a signal." Reyes hesitated. "You think anyone's even listening?" She finally looked at him, tired eyes, steady voice. "Someone always is." Below them the jungle shifted, the faint, distant echo of movement. The enemy hadn't given up. They were tracking, hunting. She folded the map, tucked it away. "Then we make sure they're listening to the right thing." She stood, stretching her sore legs, the weight of her soaked gear pulling at every muscle. Around her, the men stirred, watching her, waiting. "Rest over," she said. "We build cover, we treat the wounded, and if the world's still awake out there," she patted the cracked satellite radio at her belt, "we're going to remind it we're not dead yet." The men nodded, not shouting, not cheering, just quiet understanding. They trusted her now, not because she outranked them, but because she'd earned it, one bleeding, mud-choked step at a time. Reyes leaned against a boulder, looking down the slope they'd conquered, his breath fogged in the cold air. "You know, ma'am," he said, almost smiling, "I think the mountain blinked first." Maya didn't look back. Her gaze stayed on the mist ahead. "Then it wasn't watching close enough," she said softly. And as thunder rolled again in the distance, she adjusted her rifle and whispered under her breath, "Come find me." The mountain had spared them, but the jungle hadn't. By dusk, the rain had slowed, and the enemy was closing in again. The air had changed. The kind of stillness that comes before violence, where even the insects hold their breath. Maya felt it first, that faint prickle between the shoulder blades that every operator learns to trust. The silence was too complete, the wind too steady, the kind of quiet that isn't peace, it's patience. She crouched in the thicket of bamboo where they'd hidden the wounded. The air was damp, metallic, heavy with the scent of rot and gun oil. The rangers sat in a loose perimeter, rifles cradled, eyes scanning the fog. Reyes was beside her, rewrapping a bandage on his forearm. His hands were cracked and bleeding from the climb. "They're out there," he said quietly. "Yeah," she murmured. "They've been tracking the sound of the storm, now that it's clearing. They'll hear us breathing." Maya nodded, her eyes distant. The mist curled around them like smoke. Beyond it, movement, shadows, maybe nothing, maybe everything. She checked on Thorn. The general was awake now, half propped against a rock, face pale but focused. The pain had hollowed him, stripped him of his authority until only the man remained. "How long can we hold?" he asked. His voice was thin but steady. "Not long," Maya replied. "We're low on ammo, radios are dead, they'll find us within the hour." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're not panicking?" "I stopped panicking a long time ago, sir." He almost smiled. "Almost. You remind me of someone I used to be." She looked at him, and for a moment there was something almost human between them. Not forgiveness, just recognition of the same fire, buried under different scars. Miller appeared, crawling through the mud toward her. His face was streaked with grime and guilt. "Commander, what's the plan?" The question was simple, but it carried the weight of surrender. It was the moment he stopped pretending to lead. Maya took a slow breath. We move after dark. We'll try to get a signal out before then. She pulled the shattered satellite radio from her pack. It was a mess, casing cracked, battery drowned. But her eyes didn't see ruin. They saw possibility. "What are you doing?" Miller asked. "Improvising," she said softly. She laid out the components on a dry poncho, each piece gleaming wet in the fading light. Tiny screws, a burned board, a rusted antenna. Her fingers moved with a kind of reverence, every motion precise. She'd done this 100 times before, under fire, under pressure, under impossible odds. Ray's watched, brow furrowed. "Ma'am, that thing's fried." "Maybe," she said, "but fried doesn't mean dead." She pulled a thin strip of wire from a flashlight, stripped the casing with her knife, and soldered it to the transmitter module using the heated edge of her blade and resin scraped from a tree branch. The Rangers gathered closer, silent, watching her hands move with calm, steady precision while death circled the jungle around them. She spoke softly as she worked, half to herself. "You learn after a while that survival isn't strength, it's stubbornness with a pulse." Reyes gave a quiet chuckle. "Then we've got the right woman for the job." Maya didn't smile. Her focus was absolute. She tore open a small block of C4, pinched a fragment between her fingers and set it on a rock. The men tensed instinctively. "Relax," she said. "It burns before it blows." She struck her flint. The C4 flared in a low, controlled burn, a pale orange flame, perfect heat. She used it to gently dry the transmitter board. The process was insane. Any mistake and it would vaporize in her hands, but her touch was steady. Miller shook his head. "You're insane." She didn't look up, probably. Minutes stretched. The jungle's silence pressed tighter, like a hand around their throats. When she was done, she connected 2 wires, bypassing the processor entirely. The device looked like Frankenstein's heart, ugly, half dead, but ready to beat again. She looked up at Reyes. "We'll get one signal, maybe 5 seconds of life. I can't transmit voice, just a data burst." He nodded. "Coordinates." "Coordinates," she confirmed. Reyes grabbed her shoulder, squeezing once. "We'll buy you the time." She climbed to the ridge, the highest rock in their small clearing. The mist was lifting now, revealing the dark sprawl of jungle below. Somewhere out there, the enemy was crawling closer, rifles low, eyes bright. She lifted the makeshift antenna to the sky. Rainwater streamed down her arm. She could feel the static hum in her fingers, the ghost of power waking. The LED blinked once. Twice. Then green. "Link acquired," she whispered. She touched the 2 wires together, tapping out a short Morse sequence, grid coordinates, wounded count, situation code. Each click echoed softly in the air. When the last burst transmitted, the light went dark. "Done," she said. "Now we wait." Reyes exhaled. "If someone listening." "They'll come," Maya said simply. No one doubted her, not anymore. The wait was the longest hour of their lives. Every rustle in the trees felt like a gun barrel. Every breath was too loud. Then, faint at first, it came. Thump, thump, thump. The sound rolled through the valley like a heartbeat, heavy, deliberate. "A helicopter." The men froze. Then Reyes's eyes went wide. "That's not a Black Hawk." The sound deepened, heavier, slower, older. A Chinook. Maya's pulse jumped. The jungle trembled under the vibration. But then beneath it came something else, the distant, staccato crack of gunfire. The enemy had heard it too. "Contact incoming," a sentry hissed. "They're moving fast." Tracers sliced through the mist below, bright streaks of death. Miller's voice rose. "They're gonna reach us before the chopper can." Maya's mind raced. Terrain, timing, angles, the weight of the wounded, the direction of the wind. It all aligned in her head like a puzzle. "No," she said, "they won't." She pointed to a rock overhang above the slope, jagged, loose, hanging over the only trail leading up to them. "Raise," she ordered. "Give me your C4, all of it." He didn't question her, he just handed it over. She moved like lightning, setting charges with a surgeon's precision. Small pieces wedged into the fault lines of the rock, wires wrapped tight, detonator timed with the gutted casing of her digital watch. Miller watched in disbelief. "You're gonna bring the mountain down." "Just enough of it," she said, "to bury the path." When she finished, she checked her watch. 90 seconds. "Move the wounded down that trail 50 meters," she said. "When it goes, it'll block the path and buy us a window." Rays nodded, shouting orders. The Rangers sprang into motion, lifting litters, grabbing gear, stumbling through the mud. Maya stayed behind, crouched by the timer, rifle ready. Below, she could see the first enemy shapes through the fog, shadows flickering between trees. Too many, too close. 70 seconds. Thorne stirred on his stretcher, looking up at her with fevered eyes. "Lieutenant Commander." She met his gaze. He swallowed hard, his voice cracked. "Whatever happens, you proved your point." She said nothing, she just nodded once. 30 seconds. Rays called out, "We're clear." Maya took one last look at the descending shadows, the men who thought they'd cornered prey. Then she turned, running down the slope. 10 seconds. The jungle trembled. 3, 2, 1. The explosion wasn't a roar, it was a heartbeat, deep, final. The mountain shuddered as a wall of rock and earth collapsed, swallowing the trail and everything on it. The sound rolled for what felt like forever, until only the soft hiss of dust remained. The world went still again. Rays looked back through the settling haze. "They're buried." Maya wiped a streak of mud from her face. "Then move, the birds close." Somewhere above them, the Chinook's rotors pounded the air, closer and closer. The Rangers grabbed the litters again. Their movements were automatic now, running on instinct, exhaustion, and belief. They broke through the last line of trees into a small clearing. As the massive helicopter descended, twin rotors tearing at the canopy, floodlights slicing through the mist. The ramp dropped. Pararescue jumpers sprinted out, ghosts in flight suits. Maya waved them in. 3 wounded, priority one's the general. The medics took Thorne first. His eyes met hers as they carried him up the ramp, and for the first time there was no command in them, only respect, and something quieter, regret. Maya turned, scanning the jungle one last time. Smoke, silence, a faint echo of thunder. The Devil's Nest had finally gone quiet. "Let's go," she said. And as the Chinook rose, the jungle fell away beneath them, a green, endless sea swallowing its own sins. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The flight back to Nightingale was loud and hollow, a sound that felt too alive for the dead silence in their heads. The Chinook's rotors thundered above them, shaking the hull with every rotation, but inside, no one spoke. The world had narrowed to the metallic hum of engines and the dull ache of exhaustion that lived somewhere between relief and disbelief. Maya sat on the cold floor of the cargo bay, back against the bulkhead, helmet in her lap. The vibration of the flight thrummed through her spine. Her hands were still muddy, scraped raw, trembling slightly, not from fear anymore, but from what came after fear: survival. Across from her, Master Sergeant Rays sat hunched forward, his eyes half-closed, breathing slow. His arms were streaked with cuts, his gear shredded, but he was alive. He gave her a faint nod, the smallest ghost of a smile, not thanks, not words, just acknowledgement. Beside him, Captain Miller stared down at his gloved hands like he didn't recognize them. He hadn't said a word since the landslide. The arrogant edge that had once defined him was gone, scraped off by the jungle's teeth. In its place was something quieter: humility, or maybe guilt. The PJs worked over the wounded near the ramp, voices low and steady. Thorne lay strapped to a stretcher, his leg splinted, IV lines taped to his arm. His face was drawn tight in pain, but his eyes were open. He was watching her. For the entire flight, he didn't look away. Maya felt his gaze but didn't return it. She just kept staring at the steel floor, at the scuffed boot marks and faint traces of blood that hadn't yet dried. Every mark told a story she didn't want to remember, because every one of them ended with someone who didn't make it back on this bird. The Chinook jolted as it banked. Someone flinched. One of the younger rangers crossed himself, his lips moving soundlessly. Maya closed her eyes and leaned her head back against the metal. For the first time in hours, she let herself breathe, a slow, unsteady breath that came with the sting of salt, not from sweat, from tears she refused to show. They were safe. But safe didn't mean whole. When the ramp finally dropped onto the tarmac of Fob Nightingale, dawn was breaking. The light was thin, gray, merciless. The air smelled of rain and jet fuel and smoke, the familiar perfume of a place that devoured hope in small, daily bites. The moment the helicopter touched down, medics swarmed the ramp. "Wounded first," one of them yelled. The PJs lifted Thorne's stretcher, carrying him down to the waiting medical team. The general's head turned on the litter. His eyes found Maya again, a slow, deliberate look that stopped her where she stood. "Lieutenant Commander," he rasped. The medics hesitated. Maya stepped closer. He reached into the pocket of his mud-streaked uniform. His fingers fumbled, weak and unsteady. For a moment it looked like he couldn't do it, then he pulled it free. The trident. It was still caked with dirt and blood. The gold dulled, the edges bent slightly. It didn't gleam anymore. It looked real, human. Thorne held it out to her, his hand shaking. "This belongs to you," he said. His voice was hoarse, but it carried loud enough for the nearby medics, the colonel waiting at the edge of the pad, and the rangers who had gathered behind her to hear. The words hung there, heavy, final. Maya stepped forward, slowly, quietly. She looked at the pin in his hand, then at him. His eyes weren't blue steel anymore. They were just tired, broken. There was no triumph in her face, no vindication, only exhaustion, the kind that goes too deep to show. She took the trident from his palm. It was cold. For a moment she stared at it, the weight of it pressing into her skin. Then, with the same deliberate, precise motion as before, she pinned it back onto her chest, right over her heart. The gesture was small, but in that silence it was thunder. She gave Thorne a slow, formal nod, not forgiveness, acknowledgement. Then she turned away. The medics wheeled him toward the hospital tents, his eyes still following her until he vanished through the flaps. The colonel, an older man with lines carved deep into his face, stepped forward. "Commander Callahan," he said, "we'll need your after-action report once the debriefs begin." "Understood, sir," she replied. Her voice was soft but steady. He studied her for a moment. "You saved a lot of lives out there." She looked past him to the distant ridges beyond the perimeter. "We lost good ones, too." He nodded slowly. "You did what had to be done." She didn't answer, because what had to be done never made it easier. Later, after the chaos died down and the base had gone quiet, Maya sat alone in her container room. The rain had started again, softer this time, almost kind. The sound of it against the metal walls was hypnotic. Her uniform was still damp. Her body ached in a dozen invisible ways. On the small desk beside her cot lay a stack of paperwork, casualty forms, debrief summaries, procedural reports. She filled them out with a pen that left faint tremors in the ink. Every word was clinical, precise, emotionless. Time of contact. Enemy strength estimate. Exfil success rate. Recommendations for future operations. Not one word about humiliation. Not one about Thorne's cruelty. Not one about the trident or the insult or the climb. Just facts. Because the truth was bigger than anger. When she was done, she sat back and looked at her reflection in the small mirror bolted to the wall. Her face was pale, cut in places where branches had caught her skin. Her eyes looked older, harder. She reached up and touched the trident. It was clean again now, polished to a dull shine. She ran her thumb over the grooves, and for the first time since it was torn from her chest, she felt its weight settle right again. Outside, she could hear distant voices, the laughter of men who were alive because of her. For the first time, she let herself smile, just a little, the smallest curve of her mouth before it faded back into stillness. The jungle hadn't beaten them. The storm hadn't drowned them. And the silence, the cruel, condescending silence that had greeted her when she arrived, was gone. The men who once looked through her now looked toward her. And though no one said it aloud, every one of them knew the myth was real. Nyx had walked among them, and she'd carried them home. Maya stood, slid her rifle from the rack, and began to clean it. The motion was slow, rhythmic, meditative, each click, each stroke a kind of prayer. The door creaked open. Ray stepped inside, still in mud-streaked fatigues. He didn't speak, just carried his own weapon and cleaning kit. He met her gaze, nodded once, and took the bench beside her. Minutes later, another came. Miller. He hesitated in the doorway as if expecting to be unwelcome, but she said nothing, just shifted slightly, leaving space. He took it. Then Diaz entered, then two more, and soon the room was full, a quiet line of men sitting at benches, cleaning rifles under the fluorescent light. No one spoke, no one needed to. The only sounds were the soft metallic rhythm of bolts sliding home, the whisper of brushes through barrels, the muted clink of tools against steel. It wasn't a debrief. It was something holier. A vigil. They weren't just cleaning their weapons. They were paying respect to her, to each other, to the silence that had saved them. For a long time, Maya said nothing. Then, without looking up, she whispered almost to herself, but loud enough for them to hear. You earn trust in blood, in sweat, and in the places where no one's watching. No one answered. They just kept cleaning, the sound of it becoming something like music. And in that shared silence, something permanent took root, not command, not hierarchy, but faith. Not the kind built from orders. The kind forged in fire. Days later, the investigation began, but by then, the real verdict had already been written in every soldier's eyes. The storm had passed, but its echoes stayed. Reports were filed, statements were taken. The base buzzed with whispers that rippled from tent to tent, half rumor, half awe. They said a SEAL commander led a rescue through the Devil's Nest. They said she carried her wounded co through fire and mud. They said she was the reason any of them were still breathing. The story spread faster than the official report ever could. But inside the headquarters compound, the truth wasn't written in stories. It was dissected in air-conditioned rooms by men who'd never climbed that mountain. Maya sat at the far end of a polished table. Her uniform was clean now, her hair tied back. No visible wounds, just the faint line of a cut across her cheek, half-healed but still red. Opposite her sat three officers, a colonel from logistics, a legal advisor, and a representative from the Pentagon whose eyes never met hers for long. The recorder on the table clicked softly as it captured every breath. Lieutenant Commander Callahan, the colonel began. Let's start from the top. The Devil's Nest operation was unauthorized. General Thorne's orders placed you under temporary suspension pending reassignment, yet you re-entered the AO with armed personnel. Explain. Maya's voice was calm, even. I received reports that the extraction team was under fire and communications were lost. I made a judgment call. The legal advisor interjected. A judgment call that directly disobeyed the chain of command. Her eyes didn't waver. A judgment call that saved 12 men. The colonel leaned back, studying her, and resulted in multiple enemy KIA, a collapsed section of mountain, and property damage to Allied infrastructure. Yes, sir, she said, and prevented the execution of a captured general. That silenced them for a beat. The hum of the ceiling fan filled the room. The Pentagon rep finally spoke, his tone softer but guarded. "General Thorne has confirmed your account." Maya didn't react. "He stated," the man continued, glancing at the folder in front of him, "that your actions demonstrated exceptional leadership, tactical precision, and disregard for personal safety in defense of subordinates." He also admitted to prior misconduct. The colonel's eyes narrowed. Misconduct. The rep hesitated. He acknowledged an incident prior to deployment involving disciplinary overreach, a polite term for humiliation. Maya kept her expression still. The air felt heavier now, like the walls themselves had leaned closer. "Do you wish to file a formal complaint?" the legal officer asked. She looked up then just slightly. Her gray eyes caught the fluorescent light, calm and unreadable. "No, sir," she said. "That's been handled." The colonel frowned. "Handled how?" She paused, then spoke softly. "In the field, sir, where it mattered." The colonel studied her for a long time, but there was nothing to challenge. No anger, no accusation, just an unshakable stillness. The Pentagon rep closed the folder gently. "The review board will finalize recommendations within the week. Until then, you're to remain on base. No deployments, no instruction. Understood?" "Yes, sir." They dismissed her. She rose, saluted, and walked out, her boots clicking softly against the linoleum. The sunlight outside was harsh but clean. The kind of light that doesn't hide truth, only burns it away. Reyes was waiting near the steps, leaning against a Humvee, cigarette in hand. He stubbed it out when he saw her. "How bad?" he asked. "Could have been worse," she said. He nodded. "They'll try to make it quiet. Can't have a story like this out there." She gave a faint smile. "They never can." Reyes looked at her for a moment, something like pride behind his tired eyes. "The men signed a letter, all of them, said they won't serve under anyone else." She blinked. That one caught her. "You didn't need to do that." He shrugged. "Didn't have to, wanted to." She looked away, her throat tight. "Thank you." He gave a quiet grin. "You earned it, ma'am." A jeep pulled up near the hospital tent then. A medic climbed out, waved. "Commander, he's asking for you." Maya's stomach tightened. She nodded once and started walking. The medical tent smelled of antiseptic and damp canvas. Machines hummed softly, punctuated by the steady beeping of monitors. General Thorne lay in the far cot. His leg was wrapped in gauze. His face was pale, drained, but clearer than it had been since the mountain. When he saw her, he tried to sit up. She gestured for him to stay down. "You shouldn't be moving," she said quietly. He gave a low chuckle that turned into a cough. "You sound like my corpsman." "I take that as a compliment." He smiled faintly, then grew serious. "They told me about the inquiry. You handled yourself well." "I told the truth," she said. "I know." His gaze drifted for a moment to the window where light filtered through the canvas in thin, shifting stripes. "They'll protect me," he said after a pause. "They always do, but I made sure your record's clean, not just clean, commended." "Why?" He looked back at her, really looked. "Because it's what should have happened from the start." For the first time since she'd known him, there was no rank in his voice. No armor, just regret. "I thought I was teaching you humility," he said slowly, "but all I showed was my own weakness." Maya said nothing. The air between them was heavy with the things neither could undo. "I watched you climb that mountain," he continued, voice rough. "Watched you carry men who should have been carrying you, and I realized leadership isn't about being followed. It's about being worthy of it." She studied him for a long moment. "You'll recover, sir." "Physically, maybe." He gave a tired smile. "But command, that's gone. They're forcing retirement. I don't blame them." Maya's eyes softened slightly. "You'll find something after this. You always do." He chuckled quietly. Maybe I'll try teaching, though I suspect they don't want me telling this particular story. Probably not, she said. He reached toward his bedside table, fumbling for a folded piece of paper. This is for you, he said. She unfolded it, a letter, official seal, signed, dated. Recommendation for promotion. Lieutenant Commander Maya Callahan, for exemplary leadership, valor, and operational excellence under duress. She read it once, then looked back at him. You didn't have to. I did, he said simply, because the world needs to know what I tried to hide, that you were the better soldier. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of rain against the canvas filled the silence like soft percussion. Then Maya stood, tucking the letter into her pocket. Rest now, sir. He nodded slowly. You know, he murmured, eyes half closing, I used to believe power came from rank, but now I think it comes from restraint. She paused at the tent flap, glancing back at him. Sometimes, she said softly, it comes from mercy. She stepped out into the rain. The drops were cold against her skin, but they felt clean, like a baptism, washing away something she'd carried too long. Reyes was waiting outside again, arms crossed. How'd it go? She looked toward the horizon, the ridges still cloaked in fog, the world beyond them endless and quiet. Closure, she said. He raised an eyebrow. That a good thing? She smiled faintly. It's enough. The rain kept falling. The bass hummed around them, trucks, generators, voices, all part of a machine that never stopped. But in that small moment, amid the noise and motion, there was peace. Maya reached into her pocket and felt the folded letter. Then, without unfolding it, she tucked it into her journal between 2 pages that no one else would ever read. Because recognition didn't matter. Survival did. Integrity did. And sometimes, silence said more than medals ever could. Weeks later, when the transport plane took her home, the war didn't stay behind. It followed in her memories, her scars, and in the silence that came after glory. The C-17 droned through a pale dawn sky, clouds streaking past like ghosts of places she'd already left. Below her, the desert faded into ocean, then continent. Somewhere under those shifting blues and browns lay everything she'd survived, and everything she couldn't forget. Maya sat by the window. The seat was narrow, the air cold, but she barely felt it. Her uniform was pressed again, medals in place, trident gleaming faintly beneath the cabin lights. To anyone else, she looked like a soldier coming home from victory. But victory never looked like this. Reyes sat a few rows back, dozing with his head against the fuselage. The others, Diaz, Miller, the men who'd followed her through hell, were scattered through the rows, quiet and still. Each one carried their own war home. Every now and then, a shadow crossed her reflection in the window. She'd glance toward it, half expecting to see Thorne, but his seat was empty. He'd been transported weeks earlier, discharged under medical retirement. She hadn't seen him since that day in the tent. And she wasn't sure she ever wanted to. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing at Andrews in approximately 25 minutes. 25 minutes until it was all behind her. Or that's what they'd tell her anyway. The seatbelt light blinked on. She reached for the buckle, paused, her hand trembling faintly. The tremor was small, but it was there. The price that never left. She looked down at her gloves, resting on her lap. The fingertips were still stained faintly brown, old dirt from the mountain that refused to wash out. Her gaze drifted. The trident caught her eye again, gold, polished, perfect. But she remembered how it looked that day, bent, bloodied, covered in mud. Somehow that version had meant more. The man across the aisle, a young corporal, offered her a tired smile. "You were in the nest, right?" he asked quietly. Maya blinked, then nodded once. "My brother's unit got pulled out because of your signal," he said. "You saved his life." She didn't know what to say. Gratitude felt misplaced. so she just gave a small nod, her eyes softening. Glad he made it home. The corporal smiled faintly. He said you were a ghost, thought it was a myth till the reports came in. Maya looked back out the window. Ghosts don't get medals. He didn't have an answer for that. He just nodded, his respect quiet, genuine. When the plane finally landed, the ramp lowered with a groan of hydraulics. The air outside was cold, clean in a way that almost hurt. Reporters waited behind a barricade, cameras flashing, voices calling names. The brass stood in neat lines, polished shoes, perfect salutes, practiced smiles. But when she stepped off the ramp, the noise blurred into static. Her boots touched American soil, and all she felt was the hollow thud of her own heartbeat. Reyes fell in beside her, his face unreadable. "They'll want speeches," he muttered. "Let them talk," she said. "We already said everything that mattered." The colonel who'd debriefed her approached with a clipboard. "Commander Callahan," he said warmly, "you'll be staying in Arlington for evaluation and award ceremony prep. There's talk of a Silver Star." She met his eyes. "There's nothing silver about what we did out there." He hesitated, then nodded. "Understood." As he turned away, she caught sight of a group of civilians waiting near the vehicle's families. Wives, children, parents clutching small flags. Some of the men behind her broke ranks and ran into those waiting arms. Laughter, sobs, the sound of homecoming. Maya stood still, watching quietly. No one was waiting for her. And somehow that felt right. She walked toward the edge of the tarmac, where the wind cut sharper and the noise faded. She slipped off her gloves, letting the cold air bite at her skin. The horizon stretched endlessly, washed in gray light. Reyes joined her after a while, hands in his pockets. "Strange, isn't it?" he said. "How coming home feels harder than getting shot at." She gave a quiet smile. "At least the bullets made sense." He chuckled softly. "What'll you do now?" She shrugged. "Haven't thought that far ahead." He looked at her, then nodded. "You'll figure it out, you always do." She didn't answer, just turned her gaze toward the city skyline in the distance. Glass, steel, order. A world that had no idea what it cost to keep it standing. That night she sat alone in a small government apartment, temporary housing for returning personnel. The walls were bare, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Her duffel lay half unpacked on the bed. The trident rested on the nightstand next to her journal. She opened the journal, flipped past blank pages until she reached one marked by a folded letter, Thorne's recommendation. She unfolded it, reading it again slowly. Exemplary leadership. Valor under duress. Professional conduct. All the words they used when they didn't know how to describe soul. When she finished, she closed the journal. Then, after a long moment, she slid the letter inside a sealed envelope and wrote on the front, "Unsent." It wasn't for her, it was for the silence. Because not every truth needed to be shouted. Some were better left to live quietly, in actions, in memory, in the echo of a life carried forward. She leaned back in her chair, eyes half closed, and listened to the sound of the rain outside. Softer now, familiar. A knock came at the door. She opened it to find a young officer, crisp uniform, nervous posture. "Ma'am, sorry to disturb. They wanted to confirm your presence for the medal ceremony tomorrow." Maya looked at him for a long moment. "Tell them I'll attend." He nodded, saluted, and left. She closed the door and turned back toward the window. The city lights blinked in the distance, reflections glimmering on the wet glass. For a moment she saw her own face in the reflection, tired, yes, but still standing. And she realized something. What she'd won wasn't honor. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. The uniform could be taken, the trident could be stolen. But what no one could touch, what no one could humiliate or bury, was her dignity. The kind that doesn't speak. It simply acts. She reached up, touched the gold pin over her heart once more, and whispered into the quiet room, "For all those who never came back, I'll carry it right." Then she sat down again, alone but not lonely. Because somewhere out there, in the stillness between wars, silence had finally taken her side. And in that silence, she found peace.